the After Effects software version I am using for this particular lesson is After Effects CC 2020. You can use any older CC version if you want, or if you have a newer version like After Effects 2022, you can use that too. When we open After Effects for the first time on our system, we see a screen like this. First, the welcome screen appears. Here, you can simply create a new project or open an old project if you want. But we don't need it, so I usually keep it closed. And as you can see, here we get to see many different panels, but everything is well properly segregated, meaning divided. We will understand these panels well in the later videos, but for now, first, let's do what needs to be set up properly in After Effects. For that, I'll go to Edit then, Preferences, and click on General. Now make sure the checkboxes that are on for me are also on for you. You should keep them on. There are just two things we will turn on here, and those are default spatial interpolation. To linear looks a bit complicated. I will explain what it is later. So I will turn on and also center anchor point to new shape layers, meaning whenever we create a new shape layer, its anchor point should always remain at the center. So I will turn that on. And the home screen that we saw at the start, I don't want that whenever I open After Effects. So I will turn that off. If you want, you can leave it on. Then I will go to one of the most important things, and that is Media Cache. Now here you can see, Enable Media Cache. If yours is disabled, you should enable it. First, understand this so that it previews smoothly. That is, we need to allocate a space to store those temporary files. They must be allocated, so when you close After Effects, they automatically delete themselves, so there's no permanent file. It's just a temporary cache, which is why it comes in handy. Media does for you what the Media Disk Cache does, meaning it handles your iOS cache. Since that can be affected, I recommend that if your computer has an SSD, you allocate it there and assign as much space as possible. The more size you can give it, the better. So here, I would click on the Choose Folder option, and here I have a separate hard drive set aside, specifically allocated for Media Disk Cache, which is very helpful. Now, you need to pay attention to one thing. If you have a separate drive kept for cache, then if you select that drive and click on Select Folder, it won't be accepted. So what you need to do is choose a folder, select the drive, and create a folder inside it for caching because it can only select folders. And then, after that, I will click on Select Folder. Now it has been allocated, and I can assign any size I want because the cache drive has 400 gigabytes of space. So I'll allocate 400 gigabytes here, although it rarely ever fills up to 400 gigabytes. Instead, it usually goes up to only 100 to 150 gigabytes. But to be on the safe side, because if this disk cache gets completely filled, imagine that I've allocated 50 gigabytes here. Then as soon as the disk cache size exceeds 50 gigabytes, the preview in After Effects will stop working, or After Effects might even crash. So you need to pay very close attention to this. I'll set it to 400, and this confirmed media disk cache, I'll first clean it so that any existing disk cache will be cleared, and this one as well. They have been allocated automatically. So this step is on the drive. The tape is extremely important. Next, it's the tape. We need to go to Scripting and Expressions, and here we will see two options. Apart from scripts, there are options to write files and access the network. Turn that on as well, and enable JavaScript. Debugger. What this does is that any expression we add in the future, which you might not yet understand, I will explain later what expressions are. So whenever we need to add expressions, we can only add them when both of these options are enabled. So we'll just click it. Click OK, then Never Again, and OK. Now our After Effects is properly set. Now, for the next lesson, we'll learn what all these panels are, and what they do, and how we can customize the entire workspace. We can customize these panels if needed, but it's not really necessary. And right in this video, we will discuss and learn about the panels and workspace. Now, the After Effects software is divided into different panels like this center panel, which is the composition panel where we view the live preview of whatever we create in After Effects. The live preview appears in this composition panel. So, imagine I have imported an image, or added a video, or cleared a new layer. Then I will see it inside the live composition panel. Then here, we get the project panel. Now, any materials we use to create our animations, such as images, footages, audio, or whatever video. Will be imported or selected from here. Up above, you see the Tools panel, which contains many different tools, as you can see. But for now, only 2 tools are highlighted here, because I haven't created any composition here yet. Then on the right side, we see many different panels like, as I said, After Effects is a very powerful software, and currently, its default layout, its workspace, simply comes with the provided panels. But suppose you don't need any one of these panels, and you want to customize it then. You can click on this Settings button, and then close that panel. Now, just like I closed the Info panel, but let's say I want that panel again. Just by clicking on it, the panel will reappear. Now, if I go to the Window menu, then Any Panel, with this blue checkbox next to it, indicates that the panel is active and visible here. And if you want to add any more panels, you can go there, select them, and they will appear here. That's how the panels work. Now, let's talk about how to customize this workspace. After Effects has many panels, and we don't need to learn about every single one. Often, people find After Effects complicated because they think that every single panel or every feature must be mastered. But that's not the case at all. So let's see what workspaces are. Now, if I click here, After Effects offers various default workspaces for different tasks. So, suppose I'm an animator, and I need to create an animation. If I click on this, After Effects will provide the best workspace for animation. If I need color grading, when I click here, it opens up. Currently, it's in the form of a stack panel. So if I want to change it, then I'll go over here, click the Settings button, head to the Panel Group Settings, and then turn off the panel group. Now, what happens is each panel is arranged side by side, which save a lot of space. And then we can customize it even more. For example, if it's the audio panel, this is the panel. I don't need it, so I will right-click and close the panel. I also don't need the preview panel, so I'll close it as well, Effects and Preset. I need the Effects panel because we obviously add effects to our footages. Since this is above the layers, it should be easily accessible, so I will simply drag and drop it here, and yes. And one more thing, you can easily select the internet and drag it anywhere. Like if you drag it here, you can see the blue highlight here. I also need the panel to align paragraphs or text. After that, I don't need the tracker panel, so I will close it. I don't need the content aware fill option. And I don't need info either. Just these 2 are fine. I will place the align panel below this here. Then on the left side, I get the project panel, next to the effects and control panel. This means that whenever I have a layer in the timeline, if I add any effect on it, its properties will appear in the effects and control panel. So if you're using a large monitor, I suggest stacking it here next to the project panel. so that you don't have to repeatedly select the layer. And then click here, which takes extra time. So I prefer to keep it here normally, because if it stays like this, you have to repeatedly select the layer. And then click here, which takes too much time. So that's why I prefer keeping it normally here. And this becomes my workspace, but if I close After Effects at this point, and then restart it, it will revert to the default layout. The workspace layout it had initially, so we need to save this. Workspace, we need to save this layout. To do that, we simply click the Settings button and select Save as New Workspace. You can name it whatever you want. I will name it Dope Motions and click it. Okay, so if ever I accidentally, let's say on this span, when I click, my entire layout will get all messed up this way. So if I need that saved layout back, then I will go here and find it here. My Dope Motions workspace that I created, and on it. As soon as I click, our saved workspace will appear here. Simple and easy. So it's very important so that our workflow remains smooth and fast, remains close. So for me, this workspace is the most comfortable workspace, and I've been working in this workspace for many years. That's why it's very comfortable for me, but if you want, you can fully customize it according to your preferences, without any worries, and make sure that you save it as a new workspace after customizing. Definitely do that. Now, let's move ahead and learn how we will create a new composition, in which we will add all the other layers, add footage, and even animate it. So in this lesson, we will learn about compositions, what compositions are and how to create them. So simply, if you're using a newer version of After Effects, you can click this button and directly create a new composition. But if you're using an older version, like CS6 or something, then you can go here and click this button as well to create a new composition. So usually my main first composition, I name it Render, because what we export, that is render, will be done on this final comp. So I prefer to name it Render. Then we have resolution settings here. With properties, if you've used Photoshop or Illustrator, you know how we set up a document in them by assigning pixels. Similarly, in After Effects, the resolution size can be set from here if you go to presets. So you get to see many different presets, but we hardly ever use 90% of them at all. And if you want, you can manually set it to any size or resolution you want. Currently, the resolution is set to the industry standard resolution, which is 1920 by 1080 Full HD. If I want, I can also set it to 4K, like this, 3840 by 2160, which is 4K, but for now we'll use 1920 by 1080. Then, in the pixel aspect ratio, we get many options, but they're not really useful. You'll get 30 frames. If I increase this, I can make it 60 frames. I can set it to whatever I want, but usually online animations or videos use between 24 and 30 frames. Whatever we add to our composition, its resolution will be full, meaning it will be high quality. But this also means it will use more RAM and graphics. So if you're using a computer with limited RAM or graphics, I recommend using it at quarter resolution. This resolution means when we preview something, I recommend working at half or third resolution. But later you can also directly go to the composition and change these settings. We will keep the start time at 0. The duration of our composition. What's the duration? Currently, it's set to 30 seconds. He'll set it to 10 seconds because we're making an animation of 10 seconds. If you're making a longer, bigger animation or video editing. I usually keep it like this, but for now, keep it black and click OK. Now here you can see we have a new timeline, panel named render, which is the name we gave to this composition. We can see the render type as well, which we created for our composition. It also shows that the composition has a frame rate. It's set to 30, so we get all the details, and this is our main preview or composition panel, and again, the resolution we talked about is currently set here. It's on auto, but if you want, you can change it from here. This way, our timeline that we had, set in seconds, as you can see, shows a blue icon, this bar, which we call the time indicator. For example, if it's at 2 seconds, then our running animation will preview at that point. That's why we call it the time indicator, because our time indicator is at 2 seconds here too. It has reached 2 seconds. If I set it to 4 seconds instead, it will move to 4 seconds. Do this so that your project doesn't end up filled with assets and materials, and then you have to search for where everything is. To avoid that, they'll show you in the next lesson how to properly import and organize assets. Guys, in this lesson, we'll see how we can import any material we need into our project in After Effects and how to keep it properly organized. Now, there are 2 methods for importing. Either you could directly browse through your computer and whichever files you want to add, select them and directly drag and drop them into the After Effects project panel, and they will be added that way, or alternatively, I will double-click in this area, which will open the Import File panel, basically Explorer, which opens up. From here, you can navigate to where your media is stored and simply select whatever you want to use from that folder. Then click on Import, and it will be imported. I prefer this method since it seems better to me. All right, so as you can see here, we have our there are images, there are videos. They have been imported, so it will be very difficult to search through it if I need to change anything later on. Then for that, we'll create folders. So folder, to create it, you simply have to go here. You need to go here. You have to click, which will create a new folder, and then I will name it. I'll name it video for any videos I plan to use. I'll simply drag them into this folder and drop them. Then we'll create another folder for images, whatever images I plan to use. All those images, it'll drag into here. And then finally, it'll create one for comps for whatever compositions we create for the entire animation. I will keep them inside the comps. So in this way, you can properly segregate and organize it well. So assume if I later on add more images, it'll simply drag them into these folders. Then in the project panel, we can see some additional options like after the folder structure, what I have is the Create Composition button, which we saw at the start. So now, by going here, you also get a Create Comp option. So you can simply use the shortcut Control+N, which brings up the settings for creating a composition. Then here, we get a project settings button, which I never use. I don't even need it. Then another option appears here, which is 8 BPC, meaning how much color depth we need in our project. Usually, we have 3 options: 8, 16, and 32 BPC. 99% of the time, it works on an 8-bit per channel basis. You don't need to focus much on the other 2. 32 is very rarely used, so its need will be almost negligible. But usually for basic animations, you work at 8 BPC. And here we get a small delete button through which we can simply select any item and delete it, or just select and press the delete button to delete those items as well. So in this way, we can import assets or materials into our project panel and thus stay properly organized. Alright, so in this lesson, we will talk about tools. As you know, this is the tools panel, and many different tools are given here. So let's look at each tool one by one to see what it does. First is the Move tool, which is very simple. Let's understand by dragging and dropping an image onto our timeline. That means it will go inside the composition. And I will resize it like this. With the Move tool, we can simply fit our image however we want inside the composition. This here is our composition, and the part of the image that goes outside the composition we can't see because our composition size is 1920 by 1080, and the image is bigger than the composition. So if I want to fit this image inside this composition, I will grab these corners and shrink it like this, so it will fit inside the composition. If I want to enlarge it, I can do the opposite to make it bigger, or to simply move it, I can grab and move it like this. Next is the Hand tool. With the Move tool, we can move things inside the composition, but with the Hand tool, we can pan around, by holding the spacebar, which changes our icon from the Move tool to the Hand tool. And this way we can browse simply. And then comes the Zoom tool, which lets me zoom into any particular area. So, for example, if I want to zoom in on this app, I click here, and it zooms into that particular area. On that layer, when you click, the zoom takes effect. There's a layer, and with that I can use the rotation tool to rotate in this manner. I can do that, and then comes the Camera tool. But before that, let's take a look at the Pan Behind tool, or the Anchor Point Mover tool. What does it do? Well, here the layer has a center, which is the anchor point. This is called the anchor point. So when I rotate it, it rotates around that particular anchor point. It rotates. So if I move it by selecting this tool, I can move the anchor point wherever I want. It can be moved anywhere. For example, I'll move it to the tip of this dock. Then, if I select the rotation tool, it will rotate around that particular anchor point from here. So here too, our layer's anchor point is used. That layer will rotate or scale from that specific area. So, if I also want to scale it by pressing S to bring up the scale properties, they appear here. If I adjust the scale, it will scale using that anchor point. For example, if I move it here, and then if I want to rotate it, it will rotate from there. It rotates. Then comes the Camera tool. Now, the Camera tool only works when our layer is in 3D, and for any layer that you want to switch to 3D, you'll find a small icon here. Clicking it will turn that layer into 3D. But even then, the Camera tool won't work unless our composition contains a camera or a camera layer. So, to add a camera layer, right-click and go to New. Can you add a camera? For now, we will use the camera and explain it in detail in a later video. For now, I just want to show that it can move in 3D space. So now, what my camera is seeing is what I'm previewing here. The Camera tool itself is a very powerful tool. It has many different properties, so we will comfortably explore it later at leisure. Next is the Rectangle tool, Ellipse tool, Rounded Rectangle tool. Basically, it is a shape builder tool with two benefits. It works in two ways. For example, if I haven't selected any layer and then draw, it will create a shape layer. So there is a difference between the two. This is a shape layer and shape. Layer properties are different, whereas if I create a mask and select it, its properties will be different. Similarly, here we have different options, such as ellipse. If I want to create an ellipse and I hold Shift, it will create a perfect circle. If I release Shift, then we can create any shape manually, like a circle shape. Next is the pen tool. As we saw, with the rectangle and ellipse tools, similarly the pen tool works. If you don't need this, you can simply select this mask and delete it. But again, if no layer is selected and I choose the paint tool, it will create a shape instead of a mask. You can change its color and all that from here and easily set it to whatever color you want. Then the stroke, if you want, you can change the stroke. There are other options available inside it as well. Suppose I select the pen tool, select an image and create a random triangular shape. The first thing you find in the trace is a vertex point since a triangle has 3 vertices. If I want to add more vertexes, it'll go here and add a vortex. So here, 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 and then it'll press V for selection. It'll select it to bring up the tool, and then I can adjust this one too, something like that. Now adjusting. If I click on it again, it will become smooth. In this way, even after creating a mask, you can adjust your mask even further. Very easily, then comes the text tool. So by selecting it, I can type whatever text I want here. I can do that like this, and then by going here, this character panel is provided to control the entire text. So by going here, if I want a font, I can choose any other font. Let's say I chose Pop-It. I increased its size and adjusted its kerning. I also adjusted many different properties that you can use to customize the text. Then comes the brush tool. Now, using the brush tool, you can paint whatever you want. Now, as I have selected the brush tool, you can see here, a new panel has appeared called Paint. Then here, you can use different types of brushes. Now, the brush tool doesn't work directly in the composition. You can use the brush tool directly on the layer. So for that, you'll need to go to the layer panel and to open the layer panel, simply double-click on the layer, which will bring up the panel for that particular layer. Then you'll see that our brush tool has appeared, and here there are some properties, like the diameter, roundness, and all that. Then here, the color. And then by using it in this way, you can paint. Then if I want to change the color, just change it. And this way we can paint. And whatever I paint here will appear in the composition in position like this. Then after this comes the clone stamp tool. So if you have used Photoshop, the clone stamp tool works in the same way here. Hold Alt and select a spot where you want to clone from. Suppose I select an area here in the image. For example, I select an arc here, and then if I paint here, it will start cloning from that spot. This is the simplest way to explain the clone stamp tool. It is very simple and easy to use, but for all these tasks, I recommend that you use Photoshop. Next comes the Roto Brush tool. Using it like when we created a mask in the mask, we have to manually create points. Using the Roto Brush tool, you can directly define your area like this. Then, when I release it, it will create a selection in this way. If I want to refine this selection further, I simply draw like this, and it will take the selection directly. Rotoscoping is widely used in visual effects, and all the properties of this tool can be seen in the Effects and Controls panel here. So after making this selection with the Roto brush, we get this cut out because it has masked that much area. Again, if I expand the selection like this, we will see those changes in the final composition. If I erase something here and hold Alt while removing parts of the selection like this, the difference or change will be visible here in the final comp. The Roto Brush tool is a powerful tool on its own, and it is mostly used for visual effects. But for now, we will stay away from this tool for basics. As we learn advanced things inside After Effects, we will explore this tool later. Next is the Puppet Pen tool. By using it, you create points like this, and you can animate those points if you do puppet animation. So, for that, it is a very helpful tool if you need to make some minor changes like adjusting the perspective, or fix or animate an image or footage. Then, this tool comes in handy. So these were some tools, some basic tools inside After Effects that you will use in this section, starting with the brush tool, although the puppet pen is used very rarely. Mainly, we will use text tools and these tools more in our projects. Now in the next lesson, we will talk about the types of layers. As you can see here, I have added a text layer. So here, we will discuss what types of layers you can add and what they do. Catch that in the next lesson. Guys, so in this lesson we are going to talk about the types of layers because in After Effects, there are several different types of layers. So there are two methods to add or create a layer. One is to go to this area, right-click, and on New. If you hover, you will see that there are so many different types of layers that you can create. Alternatively, you can go here to Layer, then New, and you can create one from here as well. Or simply remember the shortcuts, which is the best way to create any layer. If you don't remember them, then just right-click here and go to New. And this is a viewer, not a layer. So if I click on this, a new viewer will open, giving us two viewers. In the composition viewer, 2x2. But we don't need that right now, so we'll close it. Then we'll right-click on New. So the very first layer is a text layer. If I click on it, a text layer is created. But to create text, you don't need to create a text layer. You can just delete it. Whenever you need to add text, simply select the text tool. And as soon as you click, a text layer will automatically be created. So you don't need to right-click and go to New to create a text layer. Just select the text tool directly and start typing. Simple and easy. Then, the next layer is the solid, which is a very important layer. What this layer does is, as soon as I click on it, it first tells us that we need to set the properties for this particular solid layer. First, it'll give it a name here. So let's name it background. We assign the name. All right, I can also specify its width and height. I can specify that too. We'll set the aspect ratio to square pixels. And as for the color I want to use, I can decide that as well. So, for now, we'll get a gray color. Then click OK, and it will create a solid layer. The solid layer is used in many different ways. Mostly, it's used for creating backgrounds, and many effects work exclusively on the solid layer. For example, if I go to Effects and Presets and type in fractal noise, which is a very important effect, if I double-click it, it will be added on top of the solid. And here, we can see the properties of that particular effect. Here, there are many different presets for this effect that I can tweak in this way, and I can create various other things as well. But suppose I want to add a background to this. Instead of an effect, then I will delete it. And if I want to add a nice, colorful background, and if I want to add any text over it, anything I want to add, I can do that. All right, next. The layer is the light layer. Now, lights and cameras. This two-layer thing works only with 3D shifted objects. For example, if I add a light layer, The first thing is we get some options here. The first option is the name. Let's say I name it light, and I can also set the light type here. I usually keep it 100. Then what kind of fall off I want. I can also decide that here. I usually keep it on smooth. How much radius do I want? 500. Fall distance, okay. And I turn on cast shadows, so that whatever object now it says here that camera and lights do not affect the 2D layer, as we discussed earlier. You select a layer and choose a layer to turn them into a 3D layer. Okay, so let me create a shape layer here. So I have created a square here. Okay, so this is a 2D shape. So when I convert it into 3D, light will start affecting it accordingly. As soon as I move the light, both are in 3D space. So if I make copies of these by pressing Ctrl D, and place one here and another. Here you can see how light is affecting all these objects. Like in real life, if we have a light source, for example, if I had a candle, how its light area would spread. We can adjust intensity here. We can control fall off here. If I set it to none, the fall off will be removed, but I keep it smooth so we can adjust the radius. To change the fall off radius, if I want a lot of work, I will set it like this and increase the intensity. Then the fall off will reduce a lot. To increase fall off, I do it like this. It'll increase the radius and decrease the intensity. It will be done in such a way as to enhance our scene. That will look good. Then comes whether to toggle shadows on or off. Also, how dark the shadows should be. I can decide that from here and adjust the diffusion as well. I can move it because it's 3D. So we have 3 dimensions. If it were a 2D layer, there would only be 2, which are the X and Y axis. And then there's the camera as well. It's either a 3D layer or a 3D camera. We'll treat it like a real camera, just like a real camera. So from here, we can select a preset, just as we choose a lens on cameras. In the same way, we'll select a preset here. So let's say I choose the 28mm preset. Then I'll press OK. And then we press C to select the camera tool. After that, we can rotate it from here to see how it looks through the camera. Then in the camera, we get a lot of options again. And you can see how, as I create new layers, they keep appearing one after the other down here. If you want, you can also move them up and down. So even in the camera, we see many different options. But we'll cover the camera in a dedicated lesson. We'll go in depth, so for that leave it there, but basically you can create this camera layer. All right, now explain everything to you so you'll understand even better. After that comes the shape layer again. To create a shape layer, you don't need to make a layer first. The moment you select a shape layer and start drawing, a layer will automatically appear here. But a layer will be created, so usually the camera, light, right solid, and important adjustment layers are the 4 pass layers that you have to create from here. Usually, whether it's a text layer or a shape layer, when you select the tool and create it here, it will automatically create a layer. Now, what does an adjustment layer do? It's mostly used for color correction or adding color effects. So let's say I add an image here and scale it down. the changes made under that adjustment layer. Will apply to whatever layer is below it. So, since there's only one layer right now, the changes apply only to that one layer. But let's say I have two layers. If I select this one and move its position here, like this, and then I add this video here as well, something like this, okay? And I also move its position like this. Now, because there are two layers visible below this adjustment layer, the changes are applying to both layers. If only one layer were visible, the changes would apply only to that layer. So, as the name suggests, an adjustment layer adjusts whatever is underneath it. As we progress, you'll understand this even better. Usually, it's used for color correction. Now if I delete it by right-clicking, we get various other layers, like Content-Aware Fill Layer, Photoshop File Layer, and Maxon Cinema 4D Layer, which aren't of any use to us right now, because these are a bit advanced. And for now, we are covering only basics, so we won't go into those now. But 99% of the time, when you're working on motion graphics, you'll mainly use these layers. The others are used very rarely. We'll also discuss how to import Photoshop and Illustrator files into After Effects as we continue with this course. So, this was a complete lesson on different types of layers in After Effects. In the next lesson, we'll learn about layer properties, because every layer has different properties. So we'll check them out in our next lesson. All right, so in this lesson, we'll talk about the types of layer properties. In the previous lesson, we saw that. What types of layers there are, right? Now, we'll see which layers have which properties. Because every layer has unique properties, but there is one property that is the same in every layer. That is the transform property. For example, if I create a new solid layer, okay, it'll confirm it, and create a new shape layer, and also create a new text layer. Now, if I select all these layers and press P, then it'll get the position property. If I press R, then it'll get the rotation property. If I press S, then it'll get the scale property. If I press T, then it'll get the opacity. So these are the main transform properties of every layer, and these properties are the same in every layer. Now let's see what all these properties actually do. All right, so first I'll delete them all and create a shape layer. So this creates a circle like this. It'll align it in the center using the Align tab, and then give a nice color. All right, so now, because this is a shape layer, its properties will be different, but the transform properties will be similar. So first, let's understand the transform properties. So the very first transform property is the position. So if you press P, you'll see the position property, which gives you two controls. This is the Y position, and this is the X position. Next comes opacity. So if I press T, I get opacity. Basically, if there is transparency on any layer, currently the opacity is at 100. If I reduce it, it will become more transparent. And in front of these properties, you can see the stopwatch icon. We can use it to animate properties, but we will see how this animation works in the keyframe lesson. Next comes the rotation property. If I press R, we get the rotation property. In this way, we can rotate any layer or object. Next is the scale property. Pressing this gives us the scale property. Using it, we can make the option smaller or bigger. Next to it, there's a small icon called Constrain Proportions. I will unlink it. Now I can either change the height, meaning I can make it smaller or bigger vertically, or I can make it smaller or bigger horizontally. If I link it again, I will undo with Ctrl+Z and link it back. Then both properties will work together, something like this. So these are the basic transform properties. Now I will delete this layer. Let's start by creating a solid first. I will press Ctrl plus Y to create a new solid layer. Press OK, and then if I click this small arrow, I see the transform properties. In a solid, we see all these different properties. If you go to the path options, there are more options. And if you go to more options, there are other options too. It can get quite confusing, so there's no need to understand all these options. That's fine. I will delete it for all layers. If I go inside, we get the path options. More options. But if I create a new shape layer like this, the properties available will only be related to the shape. You will see text solid or any other image or anything in the layers, but you will not see that in the layer. Next comes position, which is basically our position. Then comes stroke, and there are many different properties inside stroke, like color. I can change the color of the stroke. First, I can increase the stroke width. Then the opacity, which applies only to the stroke, can be decreased. If I want to give a different color, I can do that here too. Then comes dashes. If I want to add dashes to the stroke, I can do that and also adjust the length of the dashes. I can increase or decrease it, then offset it. And in taper, we can do many different things. So we can customize it a lot actually. With shape layers, we get a lot of flexibility and options to do many things. Then comes fill. In fill, there's an option to change the color. So here I can give any other color. To our circle, I can also increase or decrease the opacity of the circle. I can adjust it. So as you have seen, both layers have their own properties. We will understand this in more detail when we use shape layers and animate them. Then let's talk about light. What properties do we get in light? First are the two transform properties, which, as I said, are similar in all. Then come the light options, which we already saw in our last lesson, so only these two properties do we get with light. Then, if I create a new camera, in camera, we get many different properties. For example, if I go to camera options, we see so many properties, which are very interesting. So let me create a very simple scene here. So I will select the text tool. Let's add some text. Let's write camera. If I want this text to interact with the camera, then I have to convert it to 3D. So you'll go over here and click the 3D option. So here, it'll navigate to the 3D section. Then, by clicking on this icon, it'll convert it to 3D. It'll do that, and now it'll press the camera's designated button. To select the tool and the camera, I can rotate it a bit, and then if I want, make it even more interesting. It'll add a point light to it for further enhancement. It'll keep the light on and adjust it accordingly. It'll position it exactly where I need it. All right, and if I jump into the camera tool, I can rotate it. But the interesting thing here is the depth of field. If I turn on its depth, it will serve as the focus, which means if I increase the aperture and also increase the blur level, you'll see that the focus distance is set just like a real camera's operation. Wherever its focus distance is set, it will blur accordingly, and you can create some very interesting animations. You can even make some really interesting 3D animations. It's all very intriguing here. Everything falls into place, and then I can lower the levels considerably in my own way. I can then adjust the iris shape, which we normally keep as a fast rectangle, but here, there are even more properties or presets that you can select, and then there's the iris rotation and the spec ratio and all that. So basically, all these work within the depth of field, but you don't really need to use them extensively. Normally, you just keep on a fast rectangle. And as for the aperture and blur level, you have to balance the two. Make sure you don't increase the aperture too much, and then reduce the blur, or increase the blur excessively while decreasing the aperture. You need to use both of these very carefully. If you increase the aperture too much, you'll have a rather heavy effect. So even your system can crash on its own. And it's more than just a system crash. Remember, I told you about disk cache. So if your disk cache is getting full where you feel that your After Effects is starting to lag, then you have to do one thing, which is go to the edit menu where the port option appears. Then purge all memory in disk cache. By now, your 2 gigabytes disk cache has been built up, so I'll click OK. This will delete the disk cache, and it will start from 0 again. In this way, we can empty our disk cache from time to time. Then again, in the camera, we get a very interesting option. And to explain the camera tool, I prepared an entirely separate lesson where we'll create some very interesting animations using the camera tool. So these were the different types of layer properties that we explored. I hope this has given you a basic idea of how the properties in layers are visible in different layers. But if this seems a bit difficult to you, then forget about all the other properties and just focus solely on learning the transform properties, which include position and rotation, scale and opacity. Now in the next lesson, we'll talk a bit more in depth about mask and shape layers. So I'll see you in the next video. In this lesson, we're going to talk about mask and shape layers, and I'll create a very fun and interesting animation for you to show you how we can use these terms practically in creating animation. We'll work on and create a very fun project, and I'll call it Render, which will be our main render comp, 1920 by 1080, full HD with a 30 FPS frame rate, which is our 30 FPS. It's on, and we've set the duration to 10 seconds. Click OK. First, we need to add a background. To add a background, we use a solid layer. So we'll right-click, select New, and then choose Solid. Or you can press Ctrl+Y to create a new solid layer. I'll name it BG, which is short for background. Then click OK. Now, suppose I don't like this particular color. Then I need to add a different color to it. So we'll use the fill effect. Just go to Effects and Presets and search for it. Or you can double-click it to add it. Or you can drag and drop it onto whichever layer you want to apply it. Then I'll pick a color that looks right here. They'll select it in this way and then apply it. Next, we'll create a magnification glass, and to create that, we don't need any color for the film because if I create one right now, like if I create a circle or something like that, and align it to the center, you can see that our film color is gray or whatever color I might want to add, but I need no fill color. So if I click on this fill text, we'll see some more options, such as if I place it on this, the color will brighten, but we'll get a normal color. When I click on it, we'll get a gradient color, which I can easily adjust just the way I want. Using this, we can create some really interesting effects. Or if I need a radial gradient, I can use that too. But in this case, I don't need any color. So, we've created this shape. Here you can see it because I've added a gradient. So we also have various gradient properties available here, but we don't need them. No. You see, the edges of what I created need to be rounded, so rounded. There's a very good option here to do that. If I go to Shape and Stroke, here, it says but cap if I want, I can change it to rounded cap, and what would happen is that it becomes rounded, and then I can adjust it however I want. So I'll move it this way now. You can see because its anchor point is here, you'll select the path and then select this point, and simply move it like this. Okay, then I'll duplicate this. Now for shapes, you can create them in two ways. Either duplicate one and create a new layer, press Ctrl plus D to get new layer, or if you want to keep only one layer and just duplicate the shape, you can do that too. Now, it'll change the color of these two layers. It'll give the stroke a nice dark gray color. And then for the circle, it'll give the same color here. I can directly pick the color from here using this picker, and here we have our magnifying glass. But I want to make it more interesting. So for that, another layer will be created here, but if I want, as I did here, just duplicate this shape, I press Ctrl plus D, and it will create two shapes within the same layer. The benefit of this is that if I move the single layer, both shapes inside will move. So if you have many different shapes in one design, you can keep them inside one layer. It won't be messy, and it will be easier to compose and animate. So you'll rename this to grip. Okay? Then I'll go to its path and first change the color. Is so that it shows us a bit better. Then we'll go here and do it with a kind of dark pink color. Then we'll select its path, and then we'll move it down a bit like this. Then here, its path. We'll select the part, and with that we'll set it here. Then I'll make its stroke with a bit larger, so that it becomes our handle. And again, if I want, I can slightly ease this part so it means our magnification glass is now ready. Now, let's add a little detail to it, like we can add reflection on the handle or on the grip. So I'll select the grip and press Ctrl D to duplicate it, and I'll name it Arif Tizes Reflection, and then in its stroke I'll set the color to white, and with its stroke width I'll make it quite small. Then if I go here, I get the transform property for this particular reflection layer, for this particular reflection shape. Each shape has its own distinct transform property, as you can see after transform. The name of the shape is written, and for that particular layer, it also has its own distinct transform property. So every shape and every layer has its own transform property. The benefit is that if I make changes to a particular shape's transform properties, it will only affect that specific shape. But if I change the transform property of this layer, then every shape inside that layer will be affected. Now, its position is here. So if I move it here, it looks like a reflection. So, using shared layers, we have created a very simple yet neat illustration. Now, what I'll do is right-click and create a new adjustment layer, which I'll name Magnify. Then, on the adjustment layer, I'll add a transform effect. So I'll go to Effects and Presets. I will search more for Transform Fact, and if I increase its scale, if I make it 125, you won't see anything. It would just seem like the layers below it are scale because, as I told you in the types of layers lesson, any effects or layers underneath an adjustment layer apply to all of them. So whatever effect we add on the adjustment layer will affect all the layers underneath it. So any effect we add to the adjustment layer will impact all the layers below it. To see it properly, I will select the text tool and add some text here. It'll type Magnify Me and align its center. It'll place it at the very bottom like this. Now I want to magnify effect, meaning the transform effect I applied on this adjustment layer, to be visible only in this particular area. because like a real-life magnifying glass. If you've ever used one, the magnification shows only inside the glass area, right? To create that, it'll now use a mask. So we'll go here, select the ellipse tool, and from the center, we'll create a mask by holding Control and Shift, like this. And then, it'll move this layer down, but keep it above the text layer, because I want this magnification effect to magnify only the text. So if I increase the scale more to 150, you can see that the adjustment layer acts like a circular layer and affects only what's below it this way. This is how you can create a mask, and masks have even more properties. So if I press M, the mask layer will become visible to us. I can also change its color. So I'll make it red so it shows properly. Inside the mask, we get to see some other properties. For example, the first one is mask feather. I'll increase the feather amount. This way the edges will become softer. To show it a bit more properly, I'll add another effect to it. That is the curves effect. So you can properly see what changes we are making. I'll add it this way. So if you increase the feather, you can see how the edges are no longer sharp. Now it's feathered, meaning it's smooth. Next is mask opacity. With this mask, I can adjust the opacity lower or higher. Then comes mask expansion, or I can make the mask bigger or smaller. Like this, I'll make it a bit normal, using a glass effect. We will use null object and parenting to move all these things together, because right now they are all on different layers. The stroke is separate. The circle is separate. The frosted glass is separate. So I need to move all these things together and animate them too. Now I can only select and move here, but I cannot animate. How to do that? We will learn that in the next lesson. So in this lesson, we will learn about null object and parenting. As you can see, we have many different layers here, which I want to move together. To animate them together, we need to create a control system. How do we create the control system? To explain null object and parenting, I have a simple example. Suppose this big letter is P, which is the parent, and the small letter C is the child. Both these texts are on different layers, and this works similarly in all cases. It could be text, or it could be a shape. It might be another layer. I just use text for the example. So I can freely move this one. I can freely move this one too, but I want that when I move this P, C moves along with it automatically. I don't want to animate them separately. To do that, we have an option called Parent and Link. If you don't see this option, press F4 on your keyboard. Then the option will appear. If it still doesn't show up, go to this small area. Right-click, then go to Columns. And from there, activate it. Activate Parent and Link. Now I need to parent C to P. So I'll select C. And here is the button. It's the parent pick whip. So I use the pick whip here, drag it over, and when I release, it will connect. Now it shows that the C layer is connected to the P layer. So if I select and move the P layer, the C layer will move along with it. But yes, I can also move the C layer separately if I want. However, as soon as I move the P layer, it will move along with it, so I can animate it too. I can even animate it if I want to rotate. So I can do that, and by using this, we can create a lot of cool animations. For example, if I give it a rotation animation, and then if I want, I can also animate the position on C. Something like this. Now, what happens is that along with the rotation, the position is also animating. So by using this, we can create quite complex animations. But to build a control system, we can take this even further. Right now, these two layers aren't connected to each other. So we'll control both with one controller. To do that, we'll right-click, go to New, and create a null object. Then I'll name it Controller. Then I will connect both of these layers to this control layer. So now, this is a very simple example, but you might have many layers, and to control them, this type of controller proves very useful. So now, by using this controller, I can move both layers. Then, whether I rotate or scale, whatever I do, both layers will be affected together. In this way, we've created a small control system here. I hope that through this scene, I have given you a basic idea of how null objects and parenting work. Now we will apply it in our animation. So I will right-click and create a new null object here, ill. Name a controller, and then connect both shapes to this controller. So if I move this controller, our shape moves. But along with that, our magnification effect, which is the adjustment layer, will also be added to the controller. So now if I move it and then hide it, and if I move it by position, you can see how the magnification is working on our text. Really cool. But to further amplify the magnification effect, to make it even more realistic, and to exaggerate it, I will add the bulbs effect on it. So we'll go to Effects and Presets, and search for the bulbs effect, then it'll drag and drop it onto our adjustment layer, which centers it. And to keep it even more precise, it'll add a title, Action 2, and move it so that it is properly centered. Then we'll select the fade effect, and in this way, it'll extend it. And right on the boom. Now, if I move the controller then, what's happening is that the fade isn't moving. It is because this magnify effect has its own position properties. So now we need to connect these properties to the properties of our null object. To connect it, we will select the controller layer, which is our null object. I will press P for the position property. Then I will go to our adjustment layer. I will hold Alt and click on the stopwatch, which opens some properties here. Here we get a pick whip tool. So I will connect it. I will link it to the position of our null object. Now, if I select the null object and move it, then we can see here that the magnification properties have turned red. This gives the feel of magnification. And now moving forward, we can animate it. So in the next lesson, we will learn about keyframes, and I will teach you how to animate this. All right, guys, so in this lesson, we will talk about frames and see how we can use keyframes to scroll on our monitor. First of all, it's very important to plan out what type of animation you want to do. For now, I will hide the text and only focus on this particular magnifying glass, on how to animate it. So what I will do is select the controller. I want the animation to start from here. The magnifying glass should first shrink, almost not visible, then pop up big, and then drag from left to right so our text keeps getting magnified. This is a basic idea of mine. So we'll go here and first make it small. So I will press S for the scale property and set it to 0. Then I will create a keyframe by clicking on the stopwatch. So we have created a keyframe here. We have created a keyframe at 0%. Then I will move forward in time. Go to around 1 second and 15 frames. Then I will increase its value to 100. So now it animates from small to large like this during the time duration of 1 second and 15 frames. Because the time duration between these two keyframes is from 0 to 1 second and 15 frames. So this is our basic animation. Now I wanted to move from left to right. So to do that, I will select the controller. Press P. Pressing P gets us the position property. On that, I will create a keyframe. We'll go around 4 seconds and then drag it like this here. Now if I press U, all the properties where we have created keyframes will become visible. So first it will scale, then move from left to right, and then I want the scale to go down. So here I will create a new keyframe on this small button, this small icon. Click on it and go to around 5 seconds and set it to 0. So our start to finish animation is ready. It scales, position moves, and then scales out again here. But so far this basic keyframe is fine, but you can notice one thing here, that our animation looks very static, meaning robotic, and stiff. We need to add more natural and organic feel to it. So to add that, we need to convert these keyframes into easy ease keyframes. To convert them, simply press F9. With this, the keyframes you see here are converted into easy ease keyframes. Now what does it do? When I preview this, it has become a little smoother. Let's see what's happening in it. If I select these keyframes and click on this button, which is our graph editor, then go to the right and right-click to select the speed graph, you'll see that all our keyframes are currently linear. So from this graph, you can see how these keyframes are linear. So if I select all the frames in this manner and then press F9, they have now become frames with ease. Now this graph is much more smooth, and our animation has become significantly smoother. Now, by using this graph editor, we can apply it to our animation by using this graph editor on our animation to make it even more interesting. We can, for example, if I click on this point, it gives us the handle. Similarly, just as we use to get handles when creating masks, in the same way, we get handles in this graph editor for the frames. So, just as we use handles in masks to smooth them out, in the same way we can smooth this movement using the handle to make it smooth. So if I move it in this manner, this graph determines the speed, meaning it starts slowly, and then its movement starts. Then, when it reaches here, it will become fast, and then again, it will become slow. In this way, I can also speed up or slow down the scale movement. So, the higher up this graph is, the faster it animates. And the lower it goes, the slower it becomes. And then I'll do the same thing here as well. So now, if we preview this, you can see how much smoother the complete animation has become, and if I want to, I can adjust it in real time. This way, we get a very nice view of the movement here. So, we have created a basic animation here, which was very easy. Then in the graph editor's options, we get motion blur. Now what happens with motion blur is that when we move anything in real life at a certain speed, it doesn't appear static. It gets a little bit of blur, meaning because it is moving, that thing becomes a little blurry. So to add it, I will simply go here. Press F4, which gives us some properties. I will select all these layers like this shape and circle, and then click this button to enable motion blur on them. If I turn this button off, motion blur will be disabled. Turn on, and it will be enabled. Blue means it is enabled. So here you can see we get a slight blurry movement, which is motion blur. If I turn motion blur off, then it's just a static movement. If I turn it on, then we get this movement. How motion blur works: the faster the movement, the more the object will blur. For example, you can see here, in this particular area of ours, remember our movement is fast. Fast means select friend graph editor. Go there, and because our movement is fast here, the motion blur is also more as it decreases. The motion blur decreases, so this helps things look more realistic. But for now, I will keep it off. That's done for our basic animation using frames. If you Want to remember one thing, that in front of any property, if you see this kind of stopwatch icon, it means you can animate it. For example, if I want, I can animate rotation too. So if I create a keyframe here, go to Start and set it at 0, then we get rotation movement here. Then selecting it, I will press F9 and apply Easy Ease, and then I will select these keyframes again and go to the graph editor, and I will move it again from slow to fast. And then it will go from fast to slow, so we have got a nice rotating movement. So I hope through this basic concept, it has become clear to you how keyframes work. Now in the next lesson, we will learn how we can animate text inside After Effects. Right, so in the last lesson, we learned animating with keyframes, and in this lesson, we will talk about text animation. So in the last lesson, we created an animation like this, and if you remember, we also added a text in the background. So let's turn it on with this button. Using this button, you can turn the visibility of layers on and off. So this is our animation looking very good. So let's give the text a nice animation too, so that our whole scene starts from 0. So for now, I will keep only the text visible. And for that, I don't need to hide everything else. If I click this button, which is the solo button, then only our text will be visible. Now, there are many different ways to animate text. The most basic way is to animate its transform properties. Here we get opacity, rotation, position. So if I want to give a basic animation, I can easily create it. I will move to 1 second. The time indicator, so I will take it to 1 second, and add a keyframe for position and opacity. Then go back to 0 seconds. I will move the position down a bit and set the opacity to 0. So if I play this, we get a very simple animation, right? But we need a little more. We now need to create a slightly more interesting animation. It's a level up, you know? We basically understand After Effects. Basically, to create the animation here, there's a small button named Animate, so I will. If I click it, we get a bunch of different properties. It appears, you might say it's here as well. But here, we also have another option. The range selector, all right? So if I animate the start and an offset are the 3 properties. So if I animate the start property, each letter animates in sequence. And where is it animating from? It uses the position we've set here. So let's say I set it to 150. Then I'll go to Start and set it to 0. And it'll create a keyframe at 1 second. Then it'll change it to 100. Now we have this. A really neat animation. Now, here we have some more options. For example, I can adjust the offset, all right? If I want, I can change the animation's approach, but usually I keep it at 0. And if I go to the advanced properties, now there's an option called randomize order so that each letter becomes interesting. To achieve that, I will go here and remove it from the keyframes. Then if I click it again, all the keyframes will be removed. It'll set the start property back to 0 and the offset. And using keyframes, we will animate it. So it'll set it to -100, then move the time indicator all the way to the start and create keyframes at 128, and then it'll set it to +100. All right. And then here we also get an option for the shape. They'll change it from square to ramp up. So if I preview it, we get a very interesting side animation, right? I will set ease low to 100 and ease high to 20%. They work the same way as we saw in the last lesson about how to adjust the waves in the graph editor. So here, we get similar controls in the text as well. So if I preview the time, it starts fast because ease low is set at 100, and when it reaches here, it's at 20%. Eased out. Now our animation looks much smoother, so as we saw when the Fill Network was here for the festival. Animator 1 was created. Inside Animation 1, if I click again, Animator 2 will be created. For example, if I add rotation, Animator 2 will be created. But I want to add more properties inside Animator 1 itself, like so what I do is set it to 0, and the text paragraph alignment is left. So I will change it to center, then align it to center, and then increase it a bit like this. And then we get an animation to observe. If I want, I can turn off the randomize order once and see what kind of look it gives. This looks better. Now, what's the benefit of this kind of animation? If I had done an animation on the transform properties, and then if I move this text, the last animation would break because we have animated using the animator, which is from the pad. Here, I align it and animate a position. Okay, so I animate the position here. So it moves from here to here, so this is my animation. But if I go here and decide that no, I don't want the text here, but there, then my animation will be completely spoiled because between these two, After Effects automatically creates keyframes. It will work because I have provided a start point. An end point is provided, and in between, whenever I move the text anywhere, then frames are automatically created. So whenever you animate the text, try to animate it by using the animator because you will get lots of effects and controls. A lot of flexibility will be available while using it. So with that, I properly widen it here and align it here. Then, looking at the rest of the elements here, to see how it appears, here is our text animation, and here is our magnifying glass animation as well. So if with this small example, we'll have clearly understood how we can easily use After Effects to create some very interesting animations. In the next lesson, we will learn the camera tool, or camera, in a bit more depth about how to use the camera in After Effects to create some awesome animations, ones that will also look very realistic. It's going to be a lot of fun. They'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the camera. To add a camera, simply right-click on New and add a camera. But before adding the camera, it's very important to understand its settings. It's extremely important. And here, there are only two settings that play the most important role. Number one, the type. Here we get two types of cameras. One is the one-node camera, and the other is the two-node camera. Now, what's the difference between these two? The one-node camera orients around itself, while the two-node camera orients according to its point of interest, meaning wherever its point of interest is, the camera will focus there. So, To explain this, let's create a camera. Let's take it. But first, let's look at the presets. So preset means our lenses, for the camera. The 16 millimeters lens, 24 millimeters lens, any standard. Lens sizes are given here. For now, we'll select 28 millimeters and press it. Okay, and we have a one-node camera here. We will click. Okay, then I have a very simple scene set up with some text and shapes, so I will convert these to a 3D layer and then go here and switch to 2 views, so we get 2 views. Now, if I select the camera, this is our top view, and this is what our camera sees. So here I will switch it to custom view, okay. This is our camera. So currently, the camera is looking towards this text. Since we've selected a one-node camera, if I check its transform properties, and reset it, or double-click on the camera settings will open, and it'll switch it to a 2-node camera. Then click OK. Now we get a new option called point of interest. So wherever this point of interest is, you can see the camera will focus on that spot. That's the only difference. And whichever camera you find comfortable, whether 1-node or 2-node, you can use whichever camera you want. I usually work with a 2-node camera because it's much easier to set focus with it. So if I go here and click and hold on the Tools panel, you get some more tools like Orbit Camera Tool, Track XY Camera Tool, and Track Z Camera Tool. So you can also select these tools from here. Let's see what they do. So I will go to our active camera, and now I have selected the tool. This is the Track XY tool. What does it do? I can move the camera up or down, like this. If I select the Orbit tool, I can orbit the camera around whichever elements I have. To understand this better, let's go to the view. You can see how the camera moves around its point of interest. Right here, if I go here and select the Track Z camera tool, it means how far forward or backward we'll go. So regardless of how close or far the camera moves, you can see its point of interest doesn't move at all. If I want, I can reset it so it goes back to its original position. Let's go back to one view, and this is our camera now. All right, I can turn depth of field on and off. So I'll turn it off for now, but right now we don't see much difference. So actually, let's select the camera tool and move closer to our scene. If I increase the aperture, you can see that things are out of focus. So to bring them into focus, I will adjust the focus distance. So we will bring around here and now. I can change it like this. These settings work just like a real camera does in real life. A real camera captures focus distance at the level it works. And then we can also increase or decrease the level depending on how intense we want it to be. So let's reset time again, depth of field A for now. I'll prefer to animate. First, let's do the animation. To animate, I will select here, very close, the animation will work perfectly. Okay, so this is our simple animation. Now I go here, and then what we will do is turn on the depth of field and bring it fully into focus first. We will bring it, and you won't know whether things are in focus or not, so you can switch to View, to Horizontal View, and see how we properly set this line, which is the focus. Distance, so wherever our element is, in this case our text, is this element, see the small line here, so I will try to properly set the focus distance on it so that it will come into focus. Then we will go to one view and create a keyframe. Okay, now if I go, you can see how the camera was before. Things were not in focus and then gradually coming into focus. If you want your camera, this text, or whatever scene you have to stay in focus all the time, then you can also animate this focus distance. Like we want to create, we can do that too. For example, I will put a rotation animation here. Then I'll go here and rotate it a bit more. Something like that. And it'll move this keyframe to the very start. Then we will get a rotating animation, which looks very nice. Now, if I want to add more depth to our scene, we can also do that. So here I have this shape. They'll take a duplicate of it, press P for position, and move it forward in the Z space a bit like this. Then take another duplicate, press Ctrl plus D, press P, and move it here. You can see how our text is in focus, but the ring is near the camera and not in focus because we manually set the focus distance. And if I switch to two views, you'll get an idea. You can see the second ring is here and the third ring is here, and our camera is moving from this side. So this is how very migrate 3D animations you can create using the camera tool. And one more thing you could do with the camera tool is link a camera to a null controller. See, to do that, right click and create a new null object. We will name it controller and make sure that your null is also a 3D layer because the camera only reads 3D layers. And then I will link the camera to our controller. So now what will happen if I press P on it and animate the position? We can change its position in this way. So using this, we can create very interesting animations. So let's go here to position and set a keyframe. Then move forward and add some very random movement. Some more, and then I will press U so that all the keyframes are visible and then move it forward. Now, when I preview it, we get a slightly more dynamic animation. If I want, I can also animate rotation. Then select all the keyframes and press F9. So we'll easy ease. If I want, I can slow these down. So we'll move these keyframes forward, which will make our animation take more time. Timing plays a very important role in developing the feel of any animation. So always remember this. So this is how you can use the camera tool. Now in the next video, we'll learn about blending modes and track mattis and how to use them. Right, guys? So in this lesson, we're going to talk about blending modes. Now, the option for blending modes can be seen here. For each layer, the blending modes are located in this particular area. Now in blending modes, things are grouped. For example, darkening images has a particular group. This group is for light images, this particular group. And as you can see, various sections are given here. You can see a thin line here that divides them into a specific group. Now we cannot cover every different property, but I'll give you an overview of which modes are used the most and which ones are useful. To understand blending modes, I add a texture here. So this is the texture we have. The default mode of any layer is the normal mode, which means no blending occurs here. Now when we go into blending modes, there are groups, for example. The first group is the normal group. The second group is the subtractive group, meaning using this blending mode will darken the layer you blend it with. Using the subtractive mode, the final result will always be dark. You just need to keep this in mind. In this group, the most commonly used mode is multiply. Multiply does this. It makes all the white areas transparent. So, for example, the white areas in our scratches become transparent, and only the black areas remain visible. If I apply another mode from this group, like linear burn, as you can see, there isn't much difference. It just gives a slight tweak, which is basically their main darkening feature. The next group is the additive modes, which are basically the opposite of the subtractive mode. Here, the most commonly used mode is screen. What happens is that all black areas become transparent, and the white areas remain visible. The result of this basic group is that the final image will always be white or light. The other options we get in this particular group are basically just what you might call alternative presets for that particular mode. So, for example, if I apply any other mode, you can see that they basically work almost similarly. And which mode is right for you depends on which image you're using it on. As seen in this example, this particular blending mode can be very useful to add a nice texture to our comp. Similarly, let's say if I import a logo now, blending modes are not used only on textures, but there are many other things where they can be applied. For example, here I have a logo, which has a black background. Often, when we request a logo from a client, they don't have a PNG image, so whatever logo they have with a dark, black, or white background, they send it like that. To remove the black areas, there's no need to open Photoshop. We can simply use blend modes. In such cases, we use screen, because this blend mode works on dark parts. Using screen removes the black background, and we can use the logo like this. Now, if it was the opposite, say the logo is black and the background is white, we use multiply, which removes the white background. This is useful in many different cases, and it is not just for logos. If we want, we can use it on footage too. For example, here, I have footage of snow particles that I want to add to our image. To add it, because we need to remove the black background, I'll go to the blending mode and switch to screen, which removes the black background. And we get a very nice animation. In this way, blending modes can be very useful. Now, the next group of blending modes is called contrast mode. These are overlay, soft light, hard light, linear, and vivid, pin light, and hard mix. So for this example, I have a shape here. It features a gradient made from a combination of white and black. So if I said it's blending mode to overlay, what happens is that overlay, as I mentioned, is a combination of screen and multiply. So the black parts will act as multiply, and the white parts will act as screen. This is used to boost contrast. It can be applied to any image or animation. If you want to increase the contrast of any image, the easiest way is to make a duplicate of it by pressing Ctrl+D and set its blending mode to overlay or to soft light so that the contrast increases. Then press T for opacity and adjust its opacity by increasing or decreasing it as needed, depending on your image, like I am doing here. I set up this image. This is the before, and this is the after. Quickly, you can make the colors of your entire image or video even more contrasting. The next group of modes is difference mode, which isn't very useful in large amounts though, but these can be really useful. So if I duplicate this layer again and set it to difference, it will become black. However, as soon as I move it slightly, it gives a very interesting look. and we can see where the differences in our image lie. If I align it properly, it turns black. So I've aligned it right in the center. But as soon as I start moving it using the arrow keys, the areas with differences begin to stand out as highlights. They start getting highlighted like this. The next group of modes is the matte modes, which include stencil and alpha and luma. These are used to mask or unmask any object. So what does this mean? So let's say I have created a shape layer here. It is made in a certain way like this, like this, like this. And if I set its blending mode to stencil alpha, then whatever layers are below it, all those layers will be visible only in that particular area. So by using this, we can create very interesting animations. And by the way, all these blending modes are also available on footage and other layers, so you can play around with them and figure out how they work. So it works kind of like a mask for the shape. Not just shapes, if you have any other image or any different shape. For example, if I create something with the pen tool, like a very random shape here, and then set its blending mode to stencil alpha, boom, it will cut out that area. So this is a very useful blending mode, and you can use it as you like. Blending modes can be quite interesting, and there are many blending modes, so I recommend spending some time trying different modes and seeing what effects you get here, because they are really useful, especially if you do. A lot of VFX blending modes are very helpful for good compositing. So that was about some blending modes. Now, in the next lesson, we will learn about track mattis. So in this lesson, we will talk about track mattis, which play a very important role when you need to create complex motion graphics. This technique is very important. Here, in front of the layers, we get some modes. Next to the blending mode for track mattis. If you don't see the track matte option, you can simply click on this toggle switch button or press F4, which is a shortcut. So if I go into track matte, we get 4 options. So let's see what all this is. In all other areas, if it's not visible, then simply I will set the image's track matte to alpha matte, and as you can see, our background has become transparent, which you can verify here. This is the transparency toggle switch, which, when clicked, lets you see, like this pattern, will appear, meaning that your background is transparent. So if you render it, nothing will show up in the background, all right? Now, as soon as you change this layer's track matte, here, some elements have come into effect. As you can see, the bottom layer is visible only through this layer. If I want to invert this effect, then I will go there and select alpha inverted. Now, that's the inverse. The image is visible everywhere except the top one. Now, but one thing to consider is that we can also do this using masks. So what's the difference? In this, let's see the difference. When I set it to no track matte, we use masks. For example, here, I go and select the ellipse tool and create a mask right here, which gives the same result. But there is one issue when you animate. This image, if I select position and animate it, the mask will animate along with it. All right, aside from that, there's no additional option. But whenever we use track matte, like here, I can animate just this shape separately, and I can animate this image separately as well. For example, if you watch a short animation, it'll explain. I will add in the shape a scale animation that goes from 0 to 100, and it'll add a scale animation to this image, but in reverse, this will go in this way. It will go to 100. So, as you can see, both are separate animations. The image is zooming in and scaling, and this shape is growing from small to large, so in this way, you can create quite different animations. For example, if I want, I can give this shape a position animation here. So I will click here, and let's say I move it here, like this. Using this, you can make quite interesting and complex looking animations. This is a pretty basic example. And here, there's one more thing you need to keep in mind, which is the layer order. To use Track Matte, you need to keep both layers next to each other, meaning one above the other. If I change the layer order, for example, if I move this image down, the Track Matte will change, because now there's a text layer above this image. So we use the text as the Track Matte. You always need to keep in mind that whenever you use Track Matte options, the Track Matte only works when there's a layer above it from which it can take the matte. Now let's talk about the other two options, which are Luma Matte and Luma Inverted Matte. We've already seen Alpha Matte and Alpha Inverted, so now let's look at Luma Matte and Luma Inverted Matte. Like Alpha Matte reads alpha values, Luma Matte reads luminance values, meaning white and black values. Here, I have a gradient with both white and dark values. If I set it to Luma Matte, as you can see, where the upper gradient is white, the image is visible. And as it turns black, the image fades out or disappears. Luma Matte reads luminance values. Alpha Matte reads alpha values of any object or layer. And again, as I said, you can animate these individually, so you can create cool transitions by animating this layer. The other option is Luma Inverted. And it also has an inverted option, as simple as that. That mode, namely Luma Matte, is actually used for textures, for adding textures to your animations, which is extremely useful. So as you can see here, look, I have a texture here, and if I set on no track, it becomes a video of our texture. So I need to add this texture onto this particular shape. So we'll set it on the Luma Matte. Now, wherever it's white, meaning the parts of the texture that are white will be visible, and where it's black, it will disappear. If I invert it, then we get a very interesting look here. You've probably seen in many motion graphic projects that people use very interesting textures to make their animations even more captivating. And finally, one last thing I want to talk about. Is that it reads the alpha information of all the layers. So when does this come in handy? When you have several different layers with animations below, and you want to add a texture on top, instead of making a track matte for each layer, resulting in numerous layers, you can simply add one texture on top and turn on its preserve transparency switch. So now the texture will only be visible exactly where your shapes or layers are, and it will completely ignore the transparent areas. And the best part is, again, because we're using Track Matte, it works like this. So even if the layers below move anywhere, the texture won't shift. It will stay in place. So I can animate the text freely and animate this shape, giving us a lot of flexibility. So let's look at another example. Here I have a scratch texture that I want to apply beneath the text. And there are shapes here on top. So here, I will add a scratch texture and I will turn on the Preserve Transparency button for it. So we'll apply this way, but here's something went wrong. Something is not right here. Here, we also need to change the blending mode. So the blending mode we will set to screen, then we will get a very good texture that we have added to our element, which looks very cool in itself. It looks quite cool on its own. So these were all the things related to Track Matte. I hope this section on Track Matte is clear to you. In the next video, it's going to be a lot of fun, because we will actually create a very fun and dynamic animation using an illustration. So in this lesson, we will animate a complete Illustrator scene. I already have a setup Illustrator file, which you all can download. I have included it in the course. So to import that file, you need to go to the project panel here and double-click, and then go to wherever you save that file. Select it. Its name is Smartwatch. Watch and make sure all the options appear as you see here, meaning unchecked. I will click Import, then here. It will ask how we want to import this Smartwatch Illustrator file, either as composition or as footage. Because we want it editable, we will select as composition, and here also choose layer size, then click OK. So it will automatically create a composition, and this file will import. There are 4 elements. First, our background, then the hand, then a screen, and then an icon. We will animate all these things and add some elements too. So first, let's create our elements, so that later we can easily animate this whole scene and add it. First, we will create circles, so to make them, I will create a new composition. I will name it Circles and set the width and height to 1000 by 1000. Then click OK. Next, I will go to the Shape tool and select the Ellipse tool. Then I will double-click here to create a perfect circle. Now I can go to Ellipse 1 and adjust its size. So I'll place it somewhere around here. And I will also select the color. If you want, you can manually select the color. But what I prefer is to pick the color from here with the color pick whip. Suppose I want to pick 3 shades here. I will select the eyedropper tool, pick the color from here, then double-click to open it and get the color code. I will copy the color code with Ctrl+C, go to the circle, and paste it here. This will give us the exact same color, but I want a slightly darker tone. Something like this. Then press Ctrl+D to duplicate, and we will get another shape. Press U twice to reveal size properties, and I will make it smaller, like this. Then I'll make the color a lighter tone. Press U twice again, and make it smaller, like this. Then I will duplicate it again by pressing Ctrl+D. I will move the shape here. Then I will set this fill to none. And we need only stroke, just like this. I will set the stroke color to a nice yellow tone. Then press U twice again. So the size properties will appear. So we'll trim a little from here. And for the stroke, we'll trim it a bit shorter. Then I'll adjust it so that it works properly between these two. So that what's there gets set. All right, then I'll take a duplicate of this again. We'll press Ctrl+D, and while holding Shift, we'll move it down here. And its color, well, set to something nice in a blue tone. And now what I want is for these 2 circles to rotate along this particular path. But right now, since its anchor point is over here, its anchor point is actually here. So if I want to manually rotate them properly, it will become very difficult. So I'll use a simple method here. The key is, it can be done in 2 ways. Either we link both of these shapes with this shape and rotate that shape. That's one method. Or we create a null object, connect those 2 shapes to that null object, and then rotate that null object. But in this case, I think we can also connect it with this shape. If I need to animate this shape separately, then I'll have to connect it to a null object to animate it, which would be better. It would be better. So first, let's animate them all. So it'll select the shape. It'll press S for scale properties. Then, we'll create a keyframe at the center. And it'll set all the subsequent values to 0. So you get a simple, uniform animation. Since I need to apply this to all, it'll simply copy it. And paste it right here. For example, if I paste it here while holding Control, the keyframes will paste in that manner. But because we need it to start, it'll shift it forward. And paste it again. First of all, we do this so that everything runs smoothly. The point is at the center, just as you can see here. This is the time point. It's not centered, so to bring it to the center, use a quick hotkey control. Then, double-click on the pan behind tool. This will bring it to the center. Same for this one. And the same for this one. If it's not centered, that's all right. So now, everything is centered. Now, we'll copy its frame. Then we'll go to the graph editor and our time indicator, which it'll position here. It'll select this point, hold Shift, and drag it like this. Then, select this point and drag its handle in a similar way. This gives us a slightly interesting animation. Now we'll slightly displace these elements. First, it'll displace it by 5 frames. Then, it'll shift this layer by 5 frames. We can see a bit of variation in the circle animation. Next, it'll offset it by 5 frames. And then these two shapes by 5 frames. Now, if I preview a nice animation appears here. So, what do we do next? It'll select this red layer and name it red. And if I want, by clicking on that small icon, I can change its layer color to red. This makes it easier to work with. Then it'll select this yellow layer and set it to yellow. It'll select this blue layer and also make it blue. Since it's already blue, there's no issue. Now what we'll do is, using this red layer, connect both layers with a pick whip. In this way, you can see that both layers are connected to the red layer. It'll press R to bring up the rotation property here, and then create a rotation animation. It will run for 10 seconds and then rotate, with about 2 rotations, so in this animation. It looks good, though it seems a bit fast. Around 1 rotation is fine. If one also seems fast, then it'll reduce it. Actually, we'll set this to 0 and increase this. Okay, so this looks pretty fast. So, one of our elements is ready. Now, we'll create another element here, using shape layers and a bit of text. So here, P. Here, we'll create a shape like this. Then we'll go to Rectangle 1, Rectangle Path 1. And right. It'll duplicate it by pressing Ctrl D, move it down in time here. Then move it. It'll also change the color to something like this. Then it'll press U twice to reduce its size. And then we'll reduce the roundness a bit. Then we'll select all of these and align the top ones properly like this. We shouldn't align this one. We'll keep it here. It'll check. This looks a bit better. We'll move it closer again, and then it'll add some elements on top, just to give a sense of detail. For that, it'll select the ellipse tool here. Keep the fill to none, increase the stroke, and make a circle like this. Then here, we'll reduce its size and set it on kind of white color. which I personally feel is a very nice tone. And finally, let's add some details. For example, it'll add a date here, or I might add it like this. Give it a white color, and we'll use the font. Tactic, which is a very nice font. We'll make it smaller. And the text we can customize here. Something like this. Okay, and finally you'll add some lines here to give a sense of the detail field. We'll keep it off-white and add it here to make lines. You can also use strokes if you want. You can also use batch shapes. There's no problem with that. It'll take another duplicate inside this rectangular one. Rectangle 2, and then it'll go to 2. Transform rectangle 2 and move its position down, like this, so that we can animate both shapes together. Now, it'll control its point position by using the pan behind tool. Double-click and bring it to center. So let's animate this, one by one. First, it'll name it line, and hide the objects, then, well, unhide. And animate them one by one, okay? So first, let's animate these two. It'll use scale animation here, which we used last time. If I want, I can access it here. Let's proceed. To see the animation, it'll select both pre-comps. Press Ctrl plus C to copy. Go to the back element where I want to add animation and enable it. Then, select all of these and press Ctrl plus V to paste. And we'll get a very amazing animation. If I want, I can make a slight time difference. Like I want this layer to appear first, then this one later, so it'll move these backward in time. Okay, it looks quite good, and I'll push this a bit back as well. Its anchor point is not at the center. No. If it is not, I want the scale animation to go from this side to that side, because if I press S and animate it, it will animate like this. So what I can do is select the pan tool, enable snapping, and it'll safely adjust the anchor here. Then if I scale animate it, you can see it looks fine, but if I unlink it and want that kind of animation, I need a write-on effect, and that is what I'm going to set this here. Let's create a keyframe at 0 and move forward. It'll set this a bit more at 100. Now select this. Press F9 to apply Easy Ease. Now I have an animation like this. I really like how it looks. It'll increase the timing a bit. And finally, we'll animate our text layer. I'll place it on top, then to animate it. I'll go here to animate and add position and also add an opacity property. I'll move the opacity down and set it to 0 then. Go to Range Selector and under Round, set the offset to -100, then go to Advanced and first animate the offset here. A range of 20 to 25 will work well, giving us a very good animation. Perfect. So our second element is also ready now. Now I'll go to our main comp, which is a smartwatch comp, and let's start animating it. First, we'll animate the BG, meaning the background, and to make the background a bit more interesting, I'll duplicate it by pressing Ctrl D, and then go to Effects and Presets, and search for an effect called Grid. Double-click to apply it, and we get a very Interesting grid. I'll pick a lighter tone from the background color, like this. Then I'll adjust the width and height sliders and set the border to 3 or 4. That should work well. Then set the width to 200 and the height to 150, creating a nice pattern for us to see. Now, we'll animate both background layers. We'll go to about 1 second. Press S to open the scale property, then create a keyframe at 0 and set it to 0. So we get to see an animation like this. Then we'll animate it. I want this hand for this background animation to occur, after which our hand appears. And when it comes up, it'll go around. Right here. Okay, select the hand and press P for the position property, and it'll create a keyframe. It'll move it forward around at 2 seconds and 15 frames, and then the background has been animated. Then it'll animate this screen, so it'll give the screen a skill animation. It'll do that by pressing S for the scale property. For that, it'll go here and create a keyframe, then go here and set it to 0. So our animation is done, and it's looking nice and simple. And well, we'll tweak it a bit more, but first, we'll create a base animation, then we have this icon, which I will animate. So this time, it'll move its anchor point at the corner like this, and we'll give it a little more interesting animation, so we'll go. Select it at 4 seconds and press S for the scale property and create a keyframe. Then it'll press R for the rotation property, and then press U so that both keyframes are visible. Then we'll go back in time and it'll rotate it a little bit and set the scale to 0. So this gives us an interesting animation for the icon, which is looking very nice. And now, let's add the elements we have. First, it'll add this circle right on top of the screen. Then it'll press S to scale it down like this. Now the color is blending too much with this watch, so I want to fix that a bit. Specifically, the background color. I mean this main circle. It'll adjust a little bit. Here, it'll take it with a lighter tone like this. A little more desaturated. Now this seems a bit right to me. Now I want this circle to remain available only in those sections, meaning we'll have to cut it here. So the track matte is going to be really useful here. But before that, its perspective is flat from the front, and our screen's perspective is a bit skewed. So what we do to fix it, it'll convert it into a 3D layer. And then we'll press R, which gives us more rotation properties. Then, Illinois, try to match it to the perspective. It'll attempt it here in this way. Now it's properly matching our perspective, and I want it to remain available in just that section. So, we'll duplicate the screen by pressing Ctrl+D, and then for its track matte, it'll press F4 and set to alpha. It'll bring the circle composition under screen 2, and name it mask. Then for the circle's track matte, it'll press F4 and set the track matte to alpha matte. Well, set it up like this so that the animation becomes really interesting. Now, the animation is clearly visible. It'll move this a bit forward so that the screen animation can operate as needed, big or small. Then, we'll animate the elements comp. And it'll also convert it into a 3D layer. And if I want, I can use the same rotation property from the action. It'll set it to -43. Then set it to -8. And then to -39. Okay, perfect. Then they'll scale it down like this. And if I feel that it still isn't quite right in perspective, Then it'll actually select it. And it'll slightly also rotate it. Now this looks a bit better to me. And it'll move it forward here. So our background is animating. Then the hand is animating on the screen, and then the element like a button. As I mentioned before, the animation is very simple and plain, which makes it a bit more interesting. To do that, first select all the layers using you so that we can see all the frames. Then I'll go to Windows and this free plugin we'll use for frame winging. Then I'll select all those frames, and here I can tweak them directly. So we'll set it to around 85 or 80, and if I preview it, we see a pretty significant movement that looks just right. And finally, to give it that handheld feel here, it'll use a very simple expression. These expressions sometimes sound quite complex, but this is a very simple wiggle expression that I'm going to use. So to use that, it'll put the smartwatch into a new comp. Then it'll name it Render, all right? So it's called Smart Watch Animate here. All right, so it'll press S on it. Then here, it'll apply the wiggle expression, open and close bracket, and inside, it'll add the properties 1.5 by a comma with 2, so in 2 seconds, it will move by 1.5 points. Somehow it feels very underwhelming to me, 1 and 2 as well, so it'll increase it to around 5 then. Let's preview it. And now we're getting a subtle handheld feel that looks pretty good. Now, our base is pretty much ready. If I want, I can add even more elements on top of it. For example, if I go here and add a polygon tool, it'll just add a stroke around maybe 5 pixels. It'll set the fill to none and create it. A polygon like this. Now because I don't need a polygon, I need a triangle. It'll go here and set the points to 3. So we get a triangle. I'll also make it 3D and rotate it like this. Here we rotate it. And then press U again to increase its outer radius. Like this. So we'll place it here. And the stroke we can keep around 3 or 4. I think 3 will be good. Then I'll rotate it slightly like this. And then we'll animate this too. So I'll name it Triangle. And move it forward in time. And then press S for scale property. It'll set it to 0. Create a keyframe. Go somewhere around there. And set it to 100. So we get a very interesting triangle reveal. And I want its anchor point to be at the center. So by selecting the Pan Behind tool, we'll move the anchor point here. For its animation, meaning the scale, it'll express it, select it, and add the same animation curve here. So we get a really good animation here. Perfect. Maybe it'll reduce the stroke size further to around 2. So let's play our final animation. And boom, our animation is ready. Using very simple steps. All right, guys, so in this lesson, we'll see the correct method to render and export in After Effects. So I have a video here. Say you're working on a video on which you have applied some effects for color correction or some special effects and overlays, light leaks, or whatever in that video. Now you have to render it. So how will you do it? So when it comes to rendering or exporting, you need to make sure that the comp you want to render is open here. Then go to Composition and click Add to Adobe Media Encoder. When you install After Effects, it comes with Adobe Media Encoder installed as well. If not, you'll have to install it separately. So as soon as you click it, Adobe Media Encoder will launch. And here, Adobe Media Encoder is already launched. And this is our rendered video. So if I click here, a lot of different settings will appear, which are basically presets. But for rendering this video, the best preset, in my opinion, is H.264. Then you need to go here, select Match Source High Bitrate, and here, you'll see a lot of options. But you don't need to tweak them. First of all, I'll click here and give it a name, and assign a name here. Then I'll select the location where I want to export. So I want to name it Render Videos, then click Save. Then we'll go to the video section here. Scroll down a bit and turn on Render at maximum depth. Then I'll go further down. And this bitrate setting is very important. It's under VBR1 pass. I'll set it to CBR, meaning constant bitrate, and I'll keep it on full. If you're rendering a 4K footage, then set it to 100 because this footage is 1920 by 1080 full HD. So I'll set it to 50, okay. And well, that's all. Finally, here I'll also turn on Use Maximum Render Quality. If there is audio in the video, you need to go to the audio settings. If you don't want the audio, you can simply uncheck it so the audio won't be exported. So I'll go to Audio and scroll down here. I will set the audio bit rate to 512, which is suppose I don't have a video, but I have motion graphics. So how do we render motion graphics the right way? So that the colors of our animation are all accurate. And another thing I have to do along with rendering, since this background is transparent, I want to use it as a transition too. So I'll turn on the option that shows the transparency grid, meaning the background will stay transparent. And here we get a nice animation. I want to later place this footage over a video so that the video plays, then the animation is on top of it. So obviously we have to do this with the alpha channel. So make sure that this toggle transparency grid is turned on. To render this, I will press Ctrl M, which will add it to the render queue. I will delete the previous one first. So this is added. Then I will go to High Quality. Click on this and select QuickTime in the format. Then, in the format options, we need to make sure that the video codec is set to animation. Click OK. And the channels are set to RGB plus alpha. So set this. The same and click Render. If I turn on Caps Lock, it will render a little faster. Because the preview turns off, turning on Caps Lock, the render is complete now. Let's see how it rendered. I have added the rendered video. Suppose. Here, we'll just place it on top of this right away. If I preview it over the video, then you can see that the background is rendered with transparency. Has been rendered, so we get this very interesting animation with a transparent background. So these are the two methods by which you can render different things in After Effects. Now, there are many presets here, so I would recommend that you experiment with different presets. But 90% of the time, you'll only need these two things that I've shared with you today.